100 years from now, in a hospital bed, far, far away, a baby is born. Not just any baby, a baby born from parents who have never stepped foot on this planet. This baby, this child, will grow up to be the first true Martian. Let's take a moment and talk about it. Hello, and welcome back to Moment of Zen, a podcast about everything and nothing. I'm your host, as always, Johnson Zen. And before we begin, I just want to let you all know that this will be the last episode of season 1 of the podcast. After this episode, I'm going to take a small break from podcasting to work on an even more ambitious project. I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the episode, so stick around for that if you're interested. And as always, thank you again so much for your support, and please continue to rate, comment, review, and subscribe if you're enjoying this podcast. Thank you all so much. Mars, the next frontier. If you've been following space news recently, then you'll know that there's a lot of interest in the red planet, especially in recent years. NASA currently has 2 active rovers on the surface of Mars, which are Opportunity and Curiosity. Later this year, in late November, InSight, a lander that will be used to study Mars's seismic activity, will be landing on the planet. And much bigger and much better missions are planned for 2020, with the European Space Agency planning to send their ExoMars rover. The China National Space Administration, they're also planning on sending a rover of their own, and that mission will have a possible return sample mission associated with it. The Canadian Space Agency is also planning on sending a rover of their own. And of course, NASA is sending another rover, which is a sister rover to Mars, also in 2020. And 2 years later, in 2022, SpaceX is planning on sending their own cargo supply mission to Mars and another possible crewed mission in 2024. At least that's the plan for SpaceX as of today. Assuming these missions pick up into the next decade and into the 2030s and 40s, I would guarantee that humans would have at least stepped foot on Mars by 2050. And that's going by the most conservative estimates. Today, I want to have a little fun. It's the last episode of the season, so why not have a little fun? Let's put our trust in Elon Musk. Let's assume that his vision and plan for SpaceX and Mars comes true. Let's trust that in 2022, he succeeds in landing cargo on Mars and is able to find water there, and that the first humans make landfall on Mars 2 years later in 2024. If that were to happen, not only will it be an amazing accomplishment for humanity, it'll also open the doors to his dream of one day making humanity an interplanetary species. So I'm going to make a bold prediction and say if SpaceX is able to accomplish this initial goal of humans on Mars by 2024, I think it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that we'll see the first fully self-sufficient Mars base by 2050. What I mean by self-sufficient is that the base will be able to produce its own food, air, water, and power without the constant need of resupply missions from Earth. The base will predominantly be a research facility where scientists from Earth will come purely for research purposes and not necessarily for permanent settlement, though it's possible that some scientists would stay behind and choose to live the rest of their lives on Mars. I think it won't be until sometime around 2070 when the first true Martian city with permanent residents will be established, with a population of, I'd say, around 1,000 people. And the first Martian baby will be born in this decade. I want to give fair warning to everyone before I talk about this next part. It will involve bad things happening to babies and children. Believe me, I don't want to talk about dead children either, but the reality is that being born on Mars will be very difficult for the child. Infant mortality will be extremely high in the 2070s. There's a good chance that the majority of children born on Mars in the 2070s that do survive their birth will likely die before they even reach adulthood. But don't despair. If humans can make it to Mars, we'll be able to figure out how to save these children. I think we'll figure out how to safely give birth and take care of Martian children by the mid-2080s. Though there will still be a lot of children dying prematurely, I think that most of them will be able to make it to adulthood. Which brings us to the turn of the century, 2100. It'll be during this year that the first true Martian will be born. What I mean by that is Martian children born from parents who were also born on Mars. This generation of children will have a much easier time surviving on Mars since their parents are the surviving children of parents who came from Earth. That means the 22nd century Mars children will be born from parents who have the right genetic makeup for the reduced gravity environment of Mars. These children will be 2 generations removed from Earth, and Mars will be the only home that they know of and will probably be the only home that they will ever know. The lower gravity of Mars means that the bone density of this generation will be too low to safely even visit Earth without being crushed by their own weight. Humanity's quest to be an interplanetary species will have met a sort of ironic twist, whereby becoming an interplanetary species means that along the way, they will never be able to return to the very planet that gave birth to them, to the very planet that they chose to leave. And if you're going to be staying here for the rest of your life, how about we take a look at what life on Mars could look like? Let's say you're a Martian centennial, 100 years from now in the year 2118, and you're born in the year 2100 to Martian parents. Here we run into the first problem, the year. Normally here on Earth, we define a year as the time it takes for the Earth to make one complete revolution around the sun. But because Mars is further out from the sun, it takes Mars roughly 2 Earth years to make its revolution around the sun. This means a year on Mars is about 2 years on Earth. Okay, that seems simple enough, right? Not quite. Time is still going to be a pretty big issue on Mars. You see, a day on Earth is defined as the time it takes the Earth to make a complete revolution about its own axis. And that takes about 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds, or roughly 24 hours. On Mars, however, a Martian day takes about 24 hours, 37 minutes and 22 seconds. So basically, a Martian day is about 41 and a half minutes longer than it is here on Earth. This makes timekeeping on Mars much more tricky since all of our clocks here on Earth are designed to keep time on Earth based on what a day is. So this calls for a new system of timekeeping that must be used on Mars. Of course, scientists have thought about this and they've proposed a solution to this by using what is called Mars time, which will keep the 24-hour clock cycle that we're used to, but it uses what's called Mars hours, minutes, and seconds, which are about 2.7% longer than the Earth standard second. What this means is instead of a second being counted like 1, 2, 3, 4, they're counted slightly slower, something like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm obviously exaggerating a little bit, but I think you get the point. And actually, NASA uses this time to keep track of the Martian days with their rovers on Mars, Opportunity and Curiosity. Children growing up on Mars will grow up learning both Earth time and Mars time, but predominantly use Mars time for their day-to-day activities and use Earth time for science and communicating with Earth. It'll be like how we in the US here learn both the metric and imperial system at school, and we will normally use the metric or SI units for science, but day to day, we typically use the imperial system. Now it's time, no pun intended, to talk about what you would expect from a Martian city. You can expect as a Martian to live under a glass sky for your entire life. Part of the city will be above the surface, but the majority of the city will probably be underground. And the reason for this is that because Mars does not have a natural magnetic field, a lot of the radiation from the sun will not be deflected like it is here on Earth. So anyone on the surface of Mars will be exposed to a lot more radiation than they would here on Earth. And that radiation can be very deadly, especially since people's immune systems will probably be weakened by the reduced gravity of Mars. All around the city, you'll probably see pipes containing water and air that run into massive filtration rooms. The majority of the buildings on the surface will probably belong to research groups or private businesses from Earth, with a few buildings designated for government. All of the housing will be located underground, and each unit will probably be identical and be roughly about 100 square meters or about 1,075 square feet in area. And that's not too bad considering the average size of a studio apartment in New York City is about 550 square feet. And the inside of the underground city will have an artificial sky projected on the ceiling to match with what time of day it is on the surface. So you'll get this artificial sunrise and sunset in the morning and evening, as well as the lights dimming as we approach nightfall. And I think this will help psychologically with people not feeling that they're claustrophobic or kind of stuck inside by having this sort of artificial weather or artificial sky to help people cope with the feeling of being kind of closed in. Several large elevators will be scattered throughout the underground to help folks go up to the surface. I also expect there to be a hyperloop deeper underground that can help transport people from this dome city to another city. And just outside the glass walls will be miners, researchers, and maintenance workers working on collecting resources, studying the environment, or general maintenance work on the upkeep of the city. A landing/launch pad for incoming and outgoing spacecraft will probably be located a few miles from the city. This is to prevent any accidents from the spacecraft either landing or launching directly into the city. And the majority of jobs on Mars will probably be mining, construction, research, agriculture, and healthcare. I have no idea how the retail industry will look like, assuming there even is a real retail industry at this point. If there is, it'll probably be some sort of black market retail. There will probably be about 5 of these dome cities scattered throughout the planet, where each city is owned and operated by a political entity on Earth. I think the most logical of these are the United States, China, Russia, Japan, and the EU. Like I said before, these cities will probably be connected via an underground hyperloop to transport people and supplies. Since I imagine the US will probably make landfall on Mars first, I think the US Martian city will likely be the most well-developed and host the United Nations of Mars. And as the host of the UN of Mars, it will serve as the political capital of Mars. English will probably be the de facto language of Mars, regardless of which city-state you're born. It's possible that with enough time, an entirely new language will evolve from the standard English that we know and evolve into a sort of Martian English. The majority of the population will probably be vegetarian since meat will take too many resources to produce. We don't even know if livestock like cows and chickens will even be able to survive on Mars. That's not to say that there won't be any meat for people on Mars. Lab-grown meat probably won't have the same stigma as it currently does in 100 years. But even lab-grown meat will take a lot of resources to produce, so meat of any kind will be a luxury. Though wealthy folks will probably be able to afford to import fresh meat from Earth. Well, not really fresh meat, since it'll probably have to be frozen for the journey to Mars. So instead of meat, you'll probably be eating a lot of leafy green vegetables, peas, spinach, and tomatoes. And unfortunately, I don't know if potatoes will be able to grow on Mars. I know Mark Watney, Matt Damon, was able to do it in the movie The Martian, but Martian soil is similar to what you would find in the middle of the desert. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen a potato grow in the middle of the desert. And I really don't know if it's possible to grow potatoes using hydroponics. I mean, maybe you could tell me if it's possible. If it's not possible, it's safe to say that you're probably not going to be eating any French fries on Mars. And you're also probably not going to be eating any bread, since wheat will take too much space to produce relative to the amount of yield you'll be getting. Basically, you can use a 100 square meter lot to grow 100 kilos of lettuce as opposed to only about maybe 10 kilos of wheat. It's not very efficient to grow wheat on Mars. So sorry, no meat and no bread on Mars unless you import flour or wheat from Earth to Mars. But hey, if you're a vegetarian on a low carb, gluten free diet, this is perfect for you. Now, that seems like a pretty alien diet to a normal person here on Earth, which is a perfect segue into the next topic I want to talk about: the Martian. Martians are aliens to Earthlings like you and me. I think by the third generation of Martian-born children, they will be noticeably different from humans here on Earth. The reduced gravity means that the average Martian will be about 10% or about 15 centimeters or roughly 6 inches taller than the average human on Earth. Even though gravity is about 1/3 of what we experience here on Earth, the reduced gravity will drastically reduce bone density, making it much more difficult for bones to support weight. Martians will be physically weaker over time and will likely have a lot of cardiovascular complications from having weaker hearts. No amount of exercise will be enough to really replicate the 1G we experience here on Earth. Even with 1G simulations or even weighted clothing, eventually Martians will be able to adapt to their environment and survive on Mars comfortably. It won't be an immediate change, but a gradual one. It'll be a change that will occur over several generations on Mars. It may very well be possible that eventually these Martian humans will evolve into a different species of human, completely different from you and I. And it'll be these differences where I think Mars will become its own independent planet. Based on the history of humanity and how we tend to treat others and ourselves, I think that there will probably be a subgroup of people on Earth who will view the different physiological Martians as, quote, inferior and discriminate against them. This could lead to less funding for Martian supply ships or a much more harsher, almost authoritarian control of resources on Mars. Again, I imagine the majority of facilities on Mars will probably be funded by money from Earth. The Martians, of course, aren't going to stand by this and take this crap from Earth. You can expect probably Martian miners striking and refusing to mine for a CEO who was born on Earth. A series of retaliations on both sides will probably ensue and lead to enough political and economic strife that Martians will probably seek independence. This is something we've seen all throughout history, and as history has shown, we don't really learn from our lessons and mistakes, and we may have our first interplanetary war. And of course, you'd imagine that there's absolutely no chance that Mars will be able to win a war against Earth. And I agree with you 9 times out of 10. But there's that 10% chance that Mars does have a chance. And that chance has to do with its technology. There's a good possibility that Mars's technology will be much more advanced than it is here on Earth. The reason for this is that Mars will be heavily funded for scientific research. It'll force Mars to have to innovate on its technology in order to get more funding, as well as innovate out of necessity for its basic survival. Children on Mars will probably be much more educated than the average children on Earth. I'm not necessarily saying that they'll be smarter, but the jobs on Mars will probably require everyone there to have an equivalent of a college degree in the STEM field. So if we assume that Mars's technology outpaces Earth's technological advancements, I think Mars will have a shot at gaining independence from Earth. I honestly don't think that there will be a war between Mars and Earth. It'll be way too expensive on both sides. I think Earth will eventually have to let Mars go and let it govern itself. Regardless, a peace treaty between the two planets will probably be signed on the moon. It's the perfect location where a Martian can comfortably land without having his or her bones crushed by Earth's 1G. And finally, on June 19th, 2252, 234 years from today, Mars will fully gain its independence from Earth. You heard it here first. What actually happens or what could happen is yet to be seen. But I personally think and I want to believe that we'll become an interplanetary species one day, and that Elon Musk and so many other like-minded individuals will be the people that get us there. And with that, that's the end of season 1. But before I go, I want to quickly talk about what my plans are for my hiatus. If you don't care, then feel free to exit out the podcast. But for those of you who are interested, from a lot of the feedback I've been getting, a lot of you are saying that these podcasts aren't in the typical podcast format that you're probably normally listening or that you're probably accustomed to. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I think you're right. I think the content and presentation of this podcast are more conducive to what you might expect in the form of a YouTube video. So for the past few weeks, I've really been debating what I should be doing, and I've decided that I'll take a small break from podcasting and try making some YouTube videos instead. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm done with podcasting. That's not that at all. It's more like experimenting with which platform is best suited for me to communicate this. And I think I want to focus more on the storytelling aspect of podcasting, and I'll probably do more of that when I return to podcasting. But for now, I have a few ideas of what I want to try out in terms of YouTube, and I'm really excited about it. And if you're actually watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe if you're interested. There's going to be a lot of really awesome and cool content in the weeks to come. And I'm actually really excited about what I'm working on right now. And I'm actually in the process of making a few videos for YouTube. So expect that in the next week or two, probably in about 2 weeks. And once that comes out, I'll probably let you all know what kind of upload schedule I want to make, because I anticipate making YouTube videos would probably be a little bit longer than it is for me to record a normal podcast. So yeah, just please be patient with me, and I really appreciate it. But regardless of whatever upload schedule I will be putting out, just know that I'll be doing my best to produce the best quality content that I can do to the best of my ability. And with that said, thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been your Moment of Zen. And until next time, take care and stay fresh. See ya.